Hi, and welcome to the inaugural Battle Mistakes, where I look at games on battle reports or people playing games and observe little mistakes where there are relatively easy fixes to it. And one of the biggest is people forgetting things, forgetting little rules that their characters have, their models have. And it's totally understandable, because as much as Games Workshop have said Age of Sigmar is a streamlined version of Fantasy Battle, in some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it isn't. And one of the ways in which it most definitely isn't is everything has little special rules. I don't think there's a unit out there. Even bog standard units have some special rule. I really doubt there's a unit there that doesn't. And I suppose that's because that now the war scrolls are available for free effectively. What you really need, the battle tomes, are the allegiance rules, not so much the war scrolls, which you can sort of get, just download off Games Workshop as PDFs. So they need to make them more appealing. Oh, it's got this special rule. They're not really going to sell many models if it's just, yeah, it has stats. So remembering it is really difficult. So what I've done is a cheat sheet. I'm just going to go through how I've worked this through. It's just a couple of pages. It's not a great big long list of things. It's just things phase by phase that let me know what I need to do to particular time of the battle. First of all, of course, is the roster. It's part of the roster. This is the thing that I can show my opponent, say that this is what I've got. Nice and straightforward. You'd have that anyway. But then, sort of just after that, starting with deployment. Okay, I just have a little rule. With my Night Hunt army, there's a particular rule that it can have during deployment, so I just put that in there. If there's nothing special in deployment, then they need nothing go in there. And then I've got a particular special rule with one of my units at the start of the battle round. Doesn't matter whose turn it is, so that goes in there, and it's very sequential. Then start of the hero phase. And it really doesn't matter. This is not necessarily my hero phase. If there's something I need to be aware of in my opponent's hero phase, it can go in here. But some things are at the start of the hero phase, so I just put them in there. And wherever I am in the game, I'm just at that particular point. So in the hero phase, for example, I put the rules, the special rules for my units first, followed by the spells that I have access to. So it gives me a little breakdown on what those spells can do. Of course, I'll have the battle tome with me to see details if I forget a particular thing, or if my opponent needs to see something. But it's just there, just so that I only really need this, which is a couple of pages, and I'm set for the whole game, really. On to the next bit. So movement phase, any command abilities that I have for a particular phase, I put in there. So movement phase, again, doesn't matter whether it's mine or my opponent's, I've got that there. I'm going to read it, because there may be some things I can do even in my opponent's movement phase, very rarely. And as I say, command abilities go in there. Any extra abilities go in there. I also put in, although I don't necessarily need this as such, but I put the movement values and any special rules, such as whether they can fly in the movement phase, just again to prevent me having to flick through the book or war scrolls or anything like that. Shooting phase, any special rules I need to know there, which in my Night Hunt army was not very much. And then charge phase, any special rules you've got with the charge phase. One thing I should probably add in there in bold at the top, because I did make this mistake, is if any of my units have run, they shouldn't be charging. I made that mistake when I played my first game there. But again, I mean, that's another learning process. If there's something you thought afterwards, oh, do you know what, I forgot that, just add it in there. And after a while, it might be that there's certain things, especially if you play with the same army over and over again, eventually some things will be ingrained. You won't need to include it in there. But, you know, you never know. And the combat phase, of course, is where an awful lot of it is. And there's another thing I put in the combat phase. So again, there's a command ability at the top that I can use, so I put that in there. Again, any special rules, this could include, oh, if they get an unmodified 6 to hit or to wound, some units get a special thing that happens. That's the classic thing to put in there, because that's a classic thing to forget. And then I've got my, what I call my potency table underneath. One mistake that, again, a lot of people make is, I've done a video about this before, but just really quickly, they sometimes try and force a combat where they were always going to be on the losing side unless they got lucky. The number of times I've seen people going for something where the only way they were going to pull it off is if they were lucky, which is a bit silly, really. I mean, sometimes you're forced into it. Sometimes you're just forced into a situation and you just have to hope to be lucky. But to deliberately engineer a situation where you only win if you're lucky is a bit silly. So what I do is I work out some tables for my units with their weapons and so on, so I can work out, okay, and I base it around a unit that's got armor saves 4. Of course, If it's not got such a good armor save, then you know you're going to do a little bit better. If it's got better defenses, you know it's going to not be quite so good. And again, I also make a bit of an assumption about how many models are going to be in, because like I've got at the bottom there 4 Banshees. I've got a unit of 8 Banshees, but of course some of them might be dead, or I might not be able to get them all into combat. So I'll just assume about half the unit will be able to get in there. And I work out how many wounds on average, just the average, bog standard rolls, I might expect to do. And then I can look at it and decide, you know, is that going to be enough? Is that going to help me to win the combat, to come out on top? And if it is, great. And if it's not, then I need to think about it. Is this actually the best thing I can do? Is there something better I can do? So again, just to sort of keep your feet on the ground there, useful little exercise. And then, of course, I've got the battle shock phase. Any special rules in there? Sometimes you have command abilities. Of course, there's a core command ability with the battle shock phase. You might have an ability that either gives friendly units a bravery boost, or you might, you know, debuff effectively your enemy's bravery. So things like that should go in the battle shock phase. There might be some special rules in the battle shock phase as well. For example, there's a particular model I have not in this army. That's why the rule isn't there. But it can heal. If I've done any wounds at all, then in the battle shock phase, that model can heal some wounds on one of my models, you know, or units in range. So all of these little rules go in there. And when I change to a different army, of course, I can go through and add in the rules for the different units I've got in and take out the little rules for the units I don't. So it's nice and streamlined. I'm not having to flick through everything. I'm not having to remember everything. It's just there in a couple of pages. Now, this was actually 3 pages in the end, because the other thing I also did was, of course, put the actual war scrolls there, mostly for the stats. I mean, I was in 2 minds as to what to do about that, really. I could have just cut out the stats itself, just so I had it all on 1 page. I just put the actual war scrolls in. And then I remembered I actually have the war scrolls cards for this unit. So in future, I'm likely to just keep it to the 2 pages and use the war scrolls cards, you know, when I'm receiving attacks on a particular unit, or dealing out attacks or whatever. Just flick through to that. That's easy enough. But if you don't have the war scroll cards as physical things, you know, then just clipping them from the PDFs and putting them in there again can be useful. But as I say, the actual special rules will already be in the sections on the different ones. All you really need is the stats, and you know, you could put those in your own format as well. So that's what I do, and it basically meant that I didn't forget any of the special rules. My first ever Age of Sigmar game, and I didn't forget any of the special rules of my characters. The only couple of things I got wrong with core rules, and that was just being fluffy-headed and forgetting. But again, you know, something to put in there. And it's as simple as that. And it sometimes baffles me a little bit when I see people who are clearly playing this game quite regularly who will still forget these silly little things. And sometimes in a friendly situation, if your opponent hasn't made a decision based on your use or non-use of it, they might let you go back and do it, even though it's now the wrong phase. But of course, you won't be able to rely on that on a tournament. And actually, even in a friendly game, I mean, if your opponent has made a decision or done a thing that they might not have done if you had remembered, then at that time you really shouldn't ask to go back and do it again. So you've basically forgotten it. You've maybe lost what could have been a powerful ability. So it's just an obvious thing to do. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you got a version like this? Is it more streamlined? Is it not as streamlined as this? What do you think about the potency tables? I can go through these in a bit more detail as well. I've also been using them at the moment when looking at a Stormcast Eternals army, which will be one of the armies I do at some point, because they've got such a huge range. I'm trying to look at, okay, which units dispassionately are likely to do the most damage for the points cost. It's quite a useful method of doing that as well. So if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content. Comments down below, share with other people who might also be interested. Until next time, I'll see you later.